Welcome to the Using ArcGIS to Improve Critical Fish and Wildlife Workflows webinar, the second webinar in our Environmental and Natural Resources webinar series. I'm Megan Martinez, an industry marketing specialist here at Esri and Redlands, and I will be your moderator today. This webinar is being recorded and it will be posted in the next few days. You'll receive a follow-up email with a link to the recording. Before we get started, I would like to encourage you to post your questions in the GoToWebinar Questions dialog box during the presentation. We will answer as many questions as time permits after the webinar. Also, there will be a short survey that will pop up on your screen right after the webinar ends. We would greatly appreciate your feedback and we will use your suggestions when designing future webinars. Now I'd like to introduce our two presenters today. We have Mike Bialish, a National Account Manager on the state government team at Esri. He's based out of our Philadelphia office. And joining Mike is Matt Tarleton, a National Solutions Engineer on the state government team, and he's based out of Minneapolis. So now I'll hand it over to Mike.
Okay, thank you, Megan, and thank you everyone for participating today. We really appreciate this opportunity to talk with you about GIS in support of critical fish and wildlife workflows. A little bit more background about Matt and I. We're actually a team that works with environment and natural resources agencies in all 50 states. And this especially includes fish and wildlife agencies, and much of what we're going to share with you today comes from that experience. This webinar is actually the second in a series of webinars. In the first webinar, we started by looking at broader trends we are seeing across all the environment and natural resource agencies. So things like streamlining field operations, more effective monitoring of field and real-time information, increased constituent engagement and citizen science, documenting ROI, and so on. The subsequent webinars, including today, are focused on more specifics relative to particular agency types and their key workflows. However, each webinar really does relate back to the context and trends that we discussed last time. The first link that you see at the bottom of the slide, which we will also send following today, has a recording of the first webinar, and we'll also have recordings of today's and upcoming webinars. Additionally, we invite your feedback through the survey that Megan mentioned, and actually as a result of the feedback from the last webinar, we changed the topic for the fourth webinar, which will now be focused specific to environmental impact assessment and permitting. Okay, so as far as today, here are the topics that we're going to cover. We'll start out by discussing some of the major challenges and workflows within fish and wildlife agencies, especially those where GIS has a major role. Then, as we did in the first webinar, we'll discuss the common patterns of use of the ArcGIS platform and how that relates to these major challenges and workflows. This will be followed by a quick overview of ArcGIS Solutions, and then we'll take a deeper dive into some key workflows, namely R3 and water quality monitoring, which will include demonstrations, which Matt will give. We'll leave about 10 minutes or so for questions at the end, and as a reminder, please enter your questions in the webinar chat box as we go along. Okay, so starting out with key fish and wildlife challenges and workflows. This is by no means an exhaustive list, rather some of the challenges we see in most fish and wildlife agencies and ones where GIS is playing a variety of critical roles. So starting with R3, which is recruitment, retention, and reactivation of hunters, anglers, and boaters. Related to this, agencies are particularly challenged with engaging with and involving the community with the resources. Of course, overall, this challenge relates to the lifeblood of many agencies in terms of license and registration dollars, which ultimately sustains agencies and funds programs within them. While this has always been a concern, of course, it's something that especially recently has come into focus as license and registration sales have generally stagnated across the country and in many cases have declined. Using a location-based approach can help support many of the factors involved in dealing with these challenges, and is something that we'll dive into more later in this webinar. Of course, fish and wildlife organizations are charged with providing, maintaining, and promoting a number of recreational opportunities. And of course, very much related to that, they often have jurisdictional authority for the management and conservation of species and habitats. There are many other critical workflows, including water quality monitoring, facility and asset maintenance, as well as the inventory and monitoring of private lands and easements that offer recreational and natural benefits to the resources. Of course, there are many more than this list, but these are some of the workflows and challenges we see in every agency, and ones where GIS is becoming more and more important in supporting them and really reaching agency goals. Whichever of these you look at, the drivers and goals behind them can really be boiled down into things like enhanced decision making in terms of using the right information in a timely manner to make better decisions, whether that be for permits, land management practices, or even things like regulations decisions. For internal staffs, it's often about streamlining field operations, so things like getting away from paper-based processes and readily connecting to and informing systems of record directly from the field. And of course, overall increasing operational awareness across entire organizations from field staff through executive staffs. And of course, it's about constituents in the community and increasing awareness and services to them, but also using them as a resource. Matt and I hear all the time about how some of the best scientists are citizen scientists. So leveraging their input, them as a resource, and then also taking a step further, making sure their voices are heard and the voices of the community are generally heard on fish and wildlife related issues. GIS and location is and continues to support all of these goals and challenges. And I think we have some great examples to show you today, and which also illustrate, honestly, many of the trends that we explained and covered in the first webinar. Okay, so speaking of the first webinar, another aspect that we covered are the common patterns in which we see the ArcGIS platform being utilized, which actually provides a framework for implementation and maximum benefit of leveraging ArcGIS. This certainly applies to Fish and Wildlife Agency GIS implementations, and what you're seeing on the screen are 9 common patterns of use that provide that framework. So effectively, these are business patterns of implementation and range from things like data management and visualization to field mobility and monitoring, to analytics, design and decision support, to engaging constituents in sharing and collaboration. Of course, these are not only the core benefits that the platform offers, but they provide really a framework to assess business challenges and priorities, which inherently helps to define the appropriate solutions or set of technology solutions to address them. This has become an effective tool in helping agencies establish short and long-term vision and also assessments of business value and delivering on that value. We currently see many fish and wildlife organizations taking a step back and looking at their implementations with this framework or context in mind, and planning for future growth and increased return on investment from the ArcGIS platform. We've worked with agencies generally, of course, with this context, but also to specific workflows ranging from things like habitat and species conservation and management to easement monitoring. So as we get into the deeper dive portion of the webinar today, we'll continue to identify these patterns of use relative to the implementations that we'll be illustrating. Okay, so now that I've discussed some of the main workflows that we're seeing and patterns of use, I'm going to take a minute to talk about ArcGIS Solutions, which are readily available to you and really address many of the aspects of the workflows I just discussed and leverage the patterns of use in terms of how they are implemented. So solutions are configurations of platform components around core business processes and workflows. They basically utilize the COTS and configurable maps and apps that are part of the platform and are very simple to deploy and are supported actually just like our software is. How we develop these is through working with organizations to define core business processes and workflows and implement the platform to meet their various needs. And when we do this, we leverage the common patterns of use that I just described earlier to really take a holistic look at requirements. Also, when we do this, we orient the solution efforts on workflows that are repeatable, meaning with the example of environment and natural resources that they would have utility in whatever state that you're working in across the country. What else is beneficial is that even though these are listed under buckets, so you see on the screen, agriculture, natural resources, fish and wildlife, they're configurable and extensible so they can really be utilized across other environmental agencies who have similar challenges. So a great example of this are the invasive pest monitoring solutions that you see under agriculture. These can actually be utilized within fish and wildlife organizations as well, who of course have similar challenges. And actually these can be utilized with all levels of government too. As mentioned, these are easily deployable. In fact, you can deploy them directly to ArcGIS Online or Enterprise right from within ArcGIS Pro and configure them at the same time to meet your specific needs. As you can see, the solution configurations align well with many of the workflows and patterns I just went over, and Matt's going to show you a few of these here in a minute. Additionally, we will continue to cover some of these in more detail in future webinars, and there's a wealth of information from their website, which you can see on the screen, solutions.arcgis.com. Okay, so now that we've set some context, let's take a deeper dive into some of the key challenges in fish and wildlife. As I mentioned earlier, R3 is a critical challenge, and there are many ways that GIS can support these efforts. Often R3 comes down to questions of where. So when you step back and kind of think about it, where can I hunt, fish, or boat? Where are current licensees coming from, or conversely not coming from? Where are potential markets or areas of growth, and so on. So with this context, there are many ways in which GIS can play a critical role. So from things like configurable apps like story maps and web app builder applications to inform and hopefully excite constituents about available opportunities, and to also help them visualize what's available to them in a user-friendly format. To collaboration and engagement tools like surveys and other feedback mechanisms to leverage constituents as resources like I described earlier, and to integrate their feedback on things like fishing and hunting satisfaction, regulation changes, the quality of resources available, and so on. In addition, we see GIS playing a role in terms of internal data management and field mobility relative to critical resources and assets involved with R3. Things such as angler and hunter surveys, as well as asset inspections, which drive maintenance needs for critical assets like public boat ramps. On the analysis and decision support patterns, being able to leverage all this information in a location-based platform really allows for quick and timely analysis of resources and citizen feedback, as well as assessment of customers and potential customers and how best to engage with them. All of this really helps to inform R3-related decisions with near real-time and accurate information from a wide variety of sources. All right, so with that context and background in mind, I'm going to stop talking here and turn it over to Matt, and he's going to demonstrate some of these implementations for R3. So with that, Matt, go ahead and take it away.
Thanks, Mike, and welcome everybody. What I'm going to do today is kind of take a deeper dive into the tech behind what Mike has been talking about, behind the business needs of what many agencies across the country have been experiencing. And the first one I wanted to talk about was R3 and a little bit about how GIS can help. So R3, or recruitment, retention, and reactivation, has been a topic that Mike and I have seen across many states, across all regions of the country. And it's an interesting problem because it's not one that is just a simple solution, not a simple, kind of customizable app that you could just build. What I'm going to show today is kind of a string of GIS workflows that can be used in tandem with one another to help address the R3 problem. But it's kind of a strange way to think about it because some of the workflows I'll be showcasing today are traditionally been used by marketing or commercial outside of the realm of state government. And so I wanted to highlight how GIS can kind of support all of these things and can really be used to help tackle a problem that is really multifaceted and quite complex. So I'll be showing workflows that revolve around all of these common patterns up above, but I wanted to preface what I was going to show with a little bit of information about how this all works together. So the first part about R3 is informing the people, your constituents, your key stakeholders, what's available to them. Most agencies we've talked to have been using GIS in the past that have an absolute dearth of knowledge and data in GIS already, but a lot of times that data is not publicly available. And so one of the first things that's very easy to do now is to take things like park locations, trail locations, access points, retailers who will sell hunting licenses, and then build them into a configurable application that you can post online. So then people can visit them from their smartphone, they can use the GPS on their device, and they can find out what's around them and easily go and locate what they want to do. And so there's been several marketing studies outside of just GIS in terms of technology overall that this is something that people really want, especially younger people, the millennials and that type of thing. And so this is a good opportunity for agencies to take the GIS infrastructure that they a lot of times already have, the data that they already have, and put it out in a way that makes it easy for their users to consume and to use. So my first example will be how this actually works. And I'm switching over to the internet here, and here we go. So this is one of these park finder applications. In this particular one, this is a park and recreational locator. This is a demo that we put together from the state of Maryland. And what I like about this example is that on the top up here, you see that we have a slider and we have a buffer. So in this particular example, I'm going to look at Frederick, Maryland. And so I'll select here, and I have a buffer of 5 miles. And so the tool will automatically generate, and you can see within 5 miles in this data set, there isn't anything. But what I like about this tool is that you can bump it up. So 15 miles, you know, a bike ride or a short drive away. You expand that buffer radius, and all of a sudden you come up with one park and a host of trails. And what's really nice about this is that these, the information that's contained here can be whatever you want it to be. You can put your information, you can display it however you want, you can configure it however you want, you can brand it however you want. So in this particular example, you have a picture of this park, you have some of the information here about what's actually available. So you have camping, you have fishing, it's handicap accessible, that type of thing, hours when people can visit, a phone number to contact, and of course a website or more information. And what's really important up on top is directions. So now people can find what they want to do on their phone, on their smart device, and then they can select directions from Frederick, Maryland, or wherever their phone is located, and it will walk you through turn by turn how to actually get to that facility. And again, this particular one is just kind of like a centroid of a park, but if you had this set of access points or things like that, it can take people right to where a parking lot is, and they can go and they can enjoy the infrastructure that the state has already provided, and you know the taxpayers have already paid for. So I wanted to illustrate this as an easy way. You simply just have to go through and deploy a configuration, a template configuration, which I'll show a little bit later in a demonstration. But it's easy, low-hanging fruit. The data, if you already have it available and it's already available in Portal for ArcGIS or ArcGIS Online, it's easy to go through and then share that to an application and build this template. And as Mike was saying earlier, as we change our software, as we adjust things, this template will also change with it and it will be supported. So if you have a bug, if something happens, new version of software comes out, these templates will also move, will also evolve with that. You don't have to worry about doing any sort of custom code to make it work. So that's the first kind of low-hanging fruit of R3 that we've had many states capitalize on with some good results. The second one is a little bit more interesting, and it's reaching out and actually working with your citizens, working with your key stakeholders and constituents, and building a kind of a two-way street. So allowing people to contribute things like citizen science, but at the same time showcasing how citizen scientists and how constituents can impact their agency and how their agency is doing important work and is really, you know, a key member of the government and working hard for its constituents. So this first example right here, I showed this on the last webinar, but this is a striped bass cooperative Angler logbook from New York Department of Environmental Conservation. The technology behind this is Survey123. I'm actually accessing this on a web browser. And so it's designed for people who are out fishing. They can either have the Survey123 app on their phone. When they catch a striped bass, they can go into the app and log it, or they can simply just go to a URL on the website and go in and enter in their information. Now, what I really like about this is it's branded. It has some nice pictures in it. It's branded on the bottom here with I Heart New York with the fish. But it's really a nice, easy, clean way for people to come in and contribute their observations to the agency. And so that's powerful. It helps agencies out, but that's only one side of the coin. The other side is, well, what happens when this data has been committed? And I have two examples here that I found to be really powerful. This is the Heron Project from Maine. So this is from Mainland and Inland Fisheries, and they have a program to kind of keep track of and monitor blue heron colonies across the state of Maine. And, citizen scientists are contributing information. You can use Survey 123 or something like that to get the information in. But what I like about the story map is that it's, again, using a GIS-centric backbone to showcase how that data is actually used. So in this example here, we have a nice picture to begin with, a little bit about observation network and the actual agency itself. But what gets really interesting is you have these maps. So starting in the early 1970s, we have 372 great blue heron colonies in Maine. About 100 of those are active. And so what volunteers have been going out and doing is they've been going to these different colonies. The Maine Inland Fisheries will go through and do this, but they also have citizen scientists who go out and do this. And so volunteers from the Heron Observation Network collected twice as many colonies on foot. It saved the agency about $10,000 or 397 hours to go out and get this information. And so, again, this is a great way for you to showcase, well, people have been volunteering their time to go out and get this information. How is it being used? And show why volunteers are vital and show how their data is that they're giving the state agency is being used. So I really like this. It's a great way to kind of show some numbers and sense examples. What I also like about this is there's some great pictures. So as the volunteers have been going out, they've been taking pictures. Here's a video of a great blue heron nest with some young, some more pictures. But what I really like about the story map is there's some other really great context in here beyond just the pictures and the maps. Here's a nice story about Sedgy, who's a GPS tagged heron. So this one migrates from Haiti to Maine every year, and then Sedgy passed away during the actual migratory route. But in the past, you can compare that with other bird tracks that you can go through and showcase. And so it just kind of gives them further information about these birds. It shows people why the work they're doing is important, at the time they're volunteering this agency is important, and what this data is being used for at the state and how it impacts the ecology of Maine. So I wanted to highlight that. Again, this is a great way for a GIS-centric approach to this, and this is an example of using a story map template. Again, you're not writing custom code. This is a configurable app, and you're putting in YouTube videos, pictures, and maps alongside each other to tell a very compelling story. Another really interesting story, I'll go up to the top here, is this comes from Montana. And so big game hunting, part of the R3 initiative, big game hunting and receipts for hunting and angling drives a major part of the economy in certain states. And so this story map is put together by the Montana Fish and Wildlife and Parks Department. I really enjoy it. There's a nice welcome video that I don't have time to show right now, but just kind of an overview of how big game hunting relates to Montana and why it's important that the state has a vested interest in this, and how people kind of come in and how it helps drive the state economy. And so big game hunting expenditures, there's some nice charts in here and pictures, but what I really like are these maps where you can go through and you can physically click on a county and you can see, in this particular county area, $6 million in revenue just from big game hunting. And so this one is all big game hunting receipts. But as you scroll down, it breaks it apart by species. So here's elk, here's white-tailed deer. And so this is a really nice example of, again, taking that GIS infrastructure that many people already have, data that many people already have, packaging it together and telling a very complex and compelling story through geography and maps and pictures and YouTube videos all together to show why something like this matters. Get the message out about why your agency matters, what your agency's been doing, and really create that two-way street between people who are committing citizen science observations to you, sending them to the database, and how your agency is using them and why it matters. So these were two examples of using GIS in an R3 context. The last one is kind of a new way to go about and look about and use GIS. And so I envision this one as being part of the reactivation, which is, kind of digging through your data of your users and trying to figure out what's actually going on, and testing your biases and your hypotheses about, what you think is going on with your anglers or with your hunters. Is it actually going on in the data? So to do this brief example, this is called Insights for ArcGIS. This is a relatively new product. It's a business intelligence software, and it's kind of radical, and it's very different, and it's radically different than our other software that we have. I'm accessing this right now through a portal and through a website. I just have to sign in and I have access to this. What I really like about Insights is that you can add in data of all different types, things that were historically very difficult to use in ArcGIS. So in this particular example, I have a CSV file that was provided to us from Ohio DNR, and it's a Creel survey, Angler satisfaction survey. And so what I did is I, took the CSV file that was provided to me, I uploaded it into Insights for ArcGIS, and I kind of just took a cursory look about what I could find out from the data set, what I could see in Insights that I couldn't see with doing other spatial types of analysis. And it really lended itself well to the R3 mindset about digging in and really figuring out more about the anglers, the hunters, the users of state lands, and how you can better access them and work with them. So like I said, you can load in a CSV file, and what will happen in this particular case is we had a zip code that represents where an angler physically lives. And so what I did is I just went through here, I enabled a location with zip code, and I geocoded all these zip codes to a centroid, and here's a map of where everyone in the state of Ohio that fishes and that was part of this data set lives. This is just from 1 year. Of course, Insights works really well with multi-year type of data, but this is a good example of just a single year. Insights is also powerful in that it has hooks, not just in using CSVs or data sets that, things like SQL or something like that, that traditionally have been used in GIS, but it also access the Living Atlas. And so for those of you who are not familiar with the Living Atlas, it's an Esri curated set of data sets really, that's available for you as part of your content as ArcGIS Online. And so what I did in this particular example is I grabbed USA counties, and I wanted to know the question of, well, how does angler, satisfaction vary between people in Ohio and people outside of Ohio? So I used the generalized counties, I added it to my map, and then what I simply did is I went through and I grabbed every state but Ohio. So I have this nice, every county but Ohio here, and you can drag and you can drop and you can do a spatial aggregation or a filter by selection to actually physically, spatially, slice apart your data set. So you select what you want to do. In this particular case, I want to take all of the points on this map that intersect all of the counties that I have. So in other words, all the areas outside of Ohio, and I'm left with this map. And so if I'm interested in seeing, who's coming into Ohio to fish, by and large, it's people who are crossing the border. And if you zoom in here, people, who are right along the river, and the closest lake might be just across the border into Ohio than it is in West Virginia or Pennsylvania or something like that. There's also some interesting spatial outliers. You can see that there's people from Indiana and Chicago. But it was an interesting way to just, take 30 seconds to kind of clip this data set apart and do something that, yes, you can do in ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro, but it's so much more efficient in Insights to take a look at that. The other question I was really interested in is, well, what about fishing pressure? What about, how many fish are people removing? What fish are they out there looking for? And Insights takes every column that's in that CSV file and it brings it in as a new tabular feature that you can then drag and drop in. So in this particular one, I'm interested in species. I'm going to create a chart here. And this is an example of all the different fish species that are in the data set. And so on the left here, I have those, again, geocoded locations on zip codes. And then I have fish species. And now if I'm curious about the different types of fish and where people caught them or were fishing for them, I can click on something like a crappie, and you can see on the left here, the map will change. And so by and large, a lot of these fish species are kind of found out throughout the state. They're unrestricted. It's not that surprising. The brown trout's more of an interesting one because that one had a lot smaller of a data set, and you can see it's kind of closely clustered just in a couple of lakes. And so it's a really cool way to kind of just drag and drop and explore, what fish species are people fishing for. You can see here black bass, sunfish, and there's a lot of null points in this data set. But if you have a nice succinct data set that you eliminate things like no data, you can really start to glean some really good insights, for lack of a better word, out of your data sets that you couldn't do very easily in GIS before. The last thing I wanted to talk about was a little bit about the demographic information. And so a large part of our 3 initiatives is going through and looking at what type of people are using your resources and how could I target people that either are not, historically have used things like fishing or hunting. How do I target them now and build people back up, bring people back into the fold? So what I really like about Insights is, again, this drag and drop. So what I did here is I did a spatial aggregation. So I was really curious to see, where are these people coming from? And then once I have, counts by county, I can then take it a step further and figure out a little bit more about the people who are there. So in this particular example, I ended up with counts like this on the map, and you can see it's not too surprising. Most of the larger cities in Ohio are fairly well represented. But this blue button here is called the action button, and there's some interesting things you can do in here. One of them is called enrich data. So enrich data opens up our Tapestry data set, and I will select from in here the United States, which kind of bother because it's down at the bottom here. But I can select the United States, and I have a whole treasure trove of different data sets that I can link to the geography of my spatial aggregation. So in this particular case, counties. So what I'm really interested in is what's called Tapestry Segmentation. And Tapestry segments are, an Esri curated data set. You can append them in. It's used a lot in marketing and on the commercial team, which is where actually I learned to do this kind of stuff, working with our commercial people. But you can do dominant tapestry segmentation, or you can break it out. So you simply select the variable you want, you get on here to apply, and Insights will then combine the variables. Now that's going to take a couple minutes to do, so I won't do it live in this webinar. But before I did this, I went through and I linked those tapestries. And so you can see this dark green, the salt of the earth tapestry, shows up strongly. And then if I overlay the counts, you can see that there is a lot of that dark green that correlates strongly with the counts of the people who are in this data set. So if you look at the tapestry segmentation, salt of the earth generally is a median age of 44.1. They're lower middle class. They tend to skew generally older than more middle class. They're overwhelmingly white. But what I really like about the tapestry segments is that you can then go through and you can start to look about how these people behave and how you might be able to interact with them. So in this particular case, the salt of the earth, most of them satellite dishes that have access to high-speed internet. You can go through and you can look at the type of television markets, television programming. So if you want to do some sort of public service announcement or things like that, you can really build a strategy to help target this group of people who traditionally have been, in this case, using going fishing in Ohio, but really beef up and bring these people back into the fold. And then again, compare from year to year to see how things changes. And there's also this nice map, and you can see Ohio and Pennsylvania and Indiana have a lot of the salt of the earth tapestry. So this is, a good example of using that. But Insights is really great, not just because you can do these types of analyses, but everything gets saved. So everything I've done gets saved as a model behind the scenes. And so this model can be shared to other Insights users, and then you can just simply go to the front here and click Update. So if you have an analysis that you really like and you only do it, say, once a year, you can do everything you want. You can save out the model. You can just go here, click Update, and you can just put in a new year, and then all these cards will automatically be populated with that new information. And so Insights is a really great way for data scientists, GIS personnel, scientists to kind of go through and do an analysis, find some straw, needle in the haystack, if you will, that they can take back and then do further analysis on. Insights also supports sharing pages and sharing models. So if I share this page here, just as I can in any other content I have in ArcGIS Online or portal for ArcGIS, I can click who I want to share this with. So in this particular one, I'm just going to share with my individual portal. And then Insights will go ahead and it will construct an HTML iframe. So if you want to embed that straight into a website, you can do that. You can post it to social media. And what's great about these dashboards is that once you push them out, you can control who can see what, but people can't edit anything. They can zoom in, they can pan around, but you set the map. It's kind of set in concrete from there, and then you can pass it out. But it really gives an opportunity to showcase the map or an analysis that traditional GIS could do, but it's a lot easier to do in Insights, and it saves a lot of time. It's much more efficient here. So I just kind of wanted to show all these different data sets that on the surface don't seem like they really, or all these different workflows rather, that on the surface don't seem like they really kind of align with each other, but they can be used in tandem to kind of pick away at an R3 initiative and kind of, help augment your agency's GIS support or data scientists to kind of help and get some solutions and some questions answered about your data. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Mike, who's going to talk a little bit more about the next set of demos that I'm going to do. So I'll switch it back over to PowerPoint here, and I'll give it back to Mike for a little bit.
All right, thanks, Matt. Good job on all that. So hopefully, like Matt was saying, the connections between all these different tools are apparent, and that's one of the challenges that we see with many of these agencies across the country in addressing R3 related challenges, is just how to approach it and how to deal with all the various aspects of the issue and the challenges that are part of it. So like I said earlier, we feel like GIS and location really has a role there, and that's what we tried to illustrate to you today. All right, so what we're going to do is switch gears now to another workflow. So we're going to take a look at one of the other common workflows and challenges that I mentioned earlier, which is related to water quality monitoring and assessment. This is a very common workflow that we see, and one where we've actually made solutions, full set of solutions available, which are various, like I mentioned earlier, various configurable maps and apps that allow users to inspect waterways, do water quality sampling, things like that, share that water quality information internally across organizations and also with the public. Just like I described earlier with solutions, these are easy to deploy, and they're included actually with your ArcGIS licensing, and they help streamline field processes in terms of water quality sampling, increase operational awareness through better monitoring of field collected data, and increase community engagement by better informing the public about water quality programs and their effectiveness. As with all the available solution configurations, the components are interrelated, so they provide a holistic implementation to the workflow and allow for integration with other systems as they utilize a WebGIS-based approach, kind of like what we described, in the first webinar. So with that background in mind, I'm going to actually quickly turn it back over to Matt here to demonstrate these solutions. So Matt, go ahead and take it away again.
Okay. So I started talking about using solutions in kind of like a one-stop shop solution, and R3 doesn't give that opportunity, but there are other problems and repeatable workflows in state government agencies that do. What Mike talked about with water quality or water sampling is one. There's a whole host of them. But the solutions.arcgis.com page has a bunch of these configurable templates that you can download or deploy through Solution Deployment Tool and then put them straight in your organization. So in this particular example, I'm using this one right here, the monitor water quality. And I talked, quite a bit earlier about the Solution Deployment Tool, and I wanted to start with that. So this is ArcGIS Pro. For those of you who are not familiar, it is our new flagship desktop application for GIS. It's a replacement for ArcMap. That being said, ArcMap is still supported and is still around, for the next decade or so. And so, we're not taking ArcMap away from you, but ArcGIS Pro has a better backbone to be able to meet the computational needs that things like ArcGIS Online or 21st century computing, for that matter, bring to the table. It's modern infrastructure. It's a really fun product to use, but it works really well in this situation because it allows you to easily deploy these solutions. So I'm in Pro. I went up here to the share, and I clicked ArcGIS Solutions Deploy button, and then I get a set of tasks. And in ArcMap, you have these little modules called tasks where you basically can automate what users do. So in this particular example, if I want to deploy a solution template, of course, I have to be signed into a portal. So I'm already signed in up at the top. You can see my name up here. And then you can go in and you can actually deploy a template. So all the templates that from the website are available here. But if I go through and I search water quality, I can see here I have the water quality dashboard, the water quality status, and then the water quality survey. I can click one of these and then I just click deploy and away it goes. And so in this particular example, The dashboard I'll be showing is a configuration. I just, I downloaded the configuration file and I edited it a little bit for my needs. The water quality status web application, again, is verbatim what I downloaded. And then the water quality survey is a survey 123 document that gets downloaded. And it, once you click go, it actually does a bunch of stuff behind the scenes. It kind of just spins on the front end, but it's doing quite a bit behind the scenes. So what it actually looks like here is my example from my ArcGIS Online account. Once I actually deploy these applications, this is what I get. I get some web maps, a web application, web mapping application, and an operations view. Then once I have those maps, I can open them up and I can change the data layers underneath, configure everything I need to, but this is what the solution deployment tool actually does. So while you click go in ArcGIS Pro, it's doing a bunch of stuff, but it's actually doing behind the scenes is building these web maps, building all the schema and everything like that you can then edit later. But it's a really handy way to save a lot of time and get all this done by just clicking a button. So what you actually get with this is, like I said, you get the web maps, the operations view. And I'll start with the operations view. And so this is an example of one that I took and configured. And in this particular data set, this is a dummy data set that we put together, again, using the state of Maryland, that shows water bodies that are being sampled for pollution and safety for people to go in and swim and have contact with the water. So in this example right here, you can see we have 182 monitored water bodies, and I have my whole list here of the different water bodies. And of course, I can click on them. It'll zoom to an individual body of water. I configured the pop-ups to be available, and this is all customizable to you. If you just want to have people be able to click and see the body of water and the last sample date, that's great. But you can put as much or as little information out in this dashboard as you can. And so this is great because as information is updated on the back end in ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS, it'll automatically change. I like this operations dashboard view because you can categorize, in this particular example, here's mercury levels. And so you can see these are the moderate mercury levels or high mercury levels. And luckily, all the ones that have high mercury in them are marked as being unsafe for human contact. So it's just an easy way for you to kind of go through it and get a situational awareness of what's going on. If you have an executive, someone who's really interested about, well, how many of these bodies of water did we, inspect today? How many of them have active advisories? Are there any ones that have, really bad, something that the state has to take immediate action to do something to remedy? Dashboards are great to kind of display that information. How that information is actually captured, we have a survey 123 survey. And like I said, I clicked a button, I downloaded this, I have this in my organization. So you go through, you enter in, the name of the body of water. The schema can all be edited, but what I really like about it is that you can go through, it has drop downs, and I'm running this as a Windows application. And at the bottom, I can click yes or no. I want to, generate an advisory for people to avoid contact. So this is an example. This, of course, is all editable. You can do whatever you want with this survey, but this is what it looks like when you download it straight to your organization and you just configure it, set your data table, and away you go. I wanted to show another dashboard because this data set doesn't just use real-time information. It does real-time information really well, but you can also loop in historical data, and this is coming in the form of a related table in the back end. But you can go through, you can click an inspection, and you can get more information. And so everyone you click, you'll get new inspection details. But again, this is not just about displaying your current information. It's about building in your historical data sets. Any data sets you have in GIS already that can be brought into a portal compatible format, an ArcGIS Online or Portal for ArcGIS, it's then available to use in these dashboards. So I wanted to showcase this as a really nice example of how many bodies of water, how many are not applicable for advisories, and then how many are okay for human contact, and one of them are how many have swimming advisories or human contact advisories. Again, a nice overview. Now, water quality in particular, at least here in Minnesota, when a lake has some sort of issue where people shouldn't be swimming in it or something like that, it makes news. The media covers it. I've heard from agencies that, people generate a lot of interest. They want to know exactly what's going on. When can I go swimming? What will happen if I get in the water? Something like that. So there is also an easy way using the same data sets to push that out. This is that application that comes with the download. So in this particular case, I'm going to grab something like Snowden Pond. So first one will pop up here. And so if you have someone who's on a phone, they can either use the GPS on their phone or their smart device, or they can search by zip code or by body of water, and they can go in and they can actually see. Again, you can configure what the pop-ups show. If you just want to show that, you know, this water is contaminated, you can't come in contact with it. You can configure however you want, but this is a very easy way to get the word out. You can have this application, you can have all the bodies of water out, and then on Twitter or on Facebook and social media, you can simply push out this URL, share it with media, and if people have questions, instead of calling a number or anything like that, they can come to this website and do their own self-service mapping. So again, I wanted to showcase these solutions because they're easy to download, they're easy to implement, and you don't have to spend time building these custom codes to satisfy this workflow. You can download what's available here. You can put in custom widgets if you want to expand the capabilities of what you see here. But it's really easy to just download and then configure in your own application. And the solutions are an active source of development for us right now. We're working heavily on expanding the solution data set. Subsequent webinars will cover more about this, but I really wanted people to know that solutionsarcgis.com is out there and is available, and it really makes life easy to kind of go through and get GIS templates out to the world, and you know, spend your time developing on custom widgets or something like that, not taking the low-hanging fruit like this. So now I will turn it back over to PowerPoint. And with that, I'd like to remind everybody that this is webinar 2 of 4. The next one will be discussing critical agriculture workflows, and then the final one will be impact assessment and permit compliance. We'll have a webinar, we'll have everything recorded that you saw today available on this website right here, and then we have the GeoNet page that Mike and I will be working on if people have questions or anything like that. So now with that, I will pause for questions. Any questions you guys have, we'll answer as many as we can today. Here's our emails here if there's something else you want to take offline to ask questions, but we're happy to answer any questions you guys have now, and I thank you guys for your time.
Okay, thanks, Matt. And we've had a few questions come in, so I'll start with those, and if you have any others, you can put them in the questions box right now, and we'll try to get to them as time permits. So the first one we got, it came in during the R3 demonstration. They're asking, is this buffer only searching information that is input by the user? What about automatically pulling and updating from outside resources?
So the buffer I showed there is just a simple geoprocessing task buffer that you'd use like in ArcMap or ArcGIS Pro. And so a user can slide the widget and expand or, contrast that buffer zone. But that's about it. But in terms of how that buffer tool works, you can't really change how it works besides how big the circle is. But you can change what data sets are available to the user, and you can allow the user to select which data sets they want to search. So for this application, you could put in trails, you could put in parks, you could put in whatever, and if someone is only available or only interested in, say, cross-country skiing trails or something, they could select that layer, then run the buffer. The buffer would grab everything in the buffer size that they specify. But you can kind of control via that mechanism who does what, but you can't really edit the buffer tool too much beyond, a 5-mile radius or whatever you search on.
Right, and the idea behind those two is to be very simple, focused, applications on a particular topic, trails, parks, that kind of thing. But actually, some of our other solutions do what Matt just described, in that the buffer will search additional data sets, and those could be data sets that you manage, services that are available, generally through ArcGIS Online or maybe some other agencies that you're working with, and so that can be configured as well.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And we've got a few more. Can I do the solution deployment in ArcGIS Online, or do I need ArcGIS Pro?
So that's kind of a loaded question. So right now, it's only available through ArcGIS Pro. It will be available sometime in 2019, where you can deploy straight from ArcGIS Online, which will be really nice. But for the time being, you need a version of ArcGIS Pro that's 2.0 or later. So a current release of ArcGIS Pro in order to use the tool set.
Yep, and that deployment tool is available right on the solution site. So it's just a quick download and install, and it puts an add-in within ArcGIS Pro. But yeah, we're definitely in active development of being able to deploy directly from ArcGIS Online. We don't have a set time yet, though, as far as when that'll be released, but it'll be soon.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, great. And we have a few more. Are these tools solutions available to anyone or just governmental agencies? And what is the cost?
They are available to anyone that has access to ArcGIS Online. So if you have a named user, you have access to it. And I don't know the contractually. I have to punt to Mike on that. How the licensing works, but yes, they're available to anyone, private sector, public sector, university, whoever wants to use them. They just need to have an ArcGIS account to download the data, and they're available free of charge.
Yep, exactly. So yeah, just whatever licensing you have, there's no cost beyond that. So again, like I mentioned early on, they're configurations of our core products, our COTS and configurable products, and so they're basically just furthering, the capabilities that are available to you through the licensing that you would already have. That's the idea behind them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and one on Insights. Does Insights process raster data?
Ooh, currently not right now. That's something that I'm absolutely itching to get my hands on, and something that I've talked to people about, but I haven't heard how exactly that's going to work yet. Insights is something that every quarter there'll be a new update. There's been a lot of changes in the past year with it. It's gotten a lot stronger. But no, I'm itching to have capabilities like rasters and complex polygons and stuff like that in there, but it's not available yet.
Okay. And how do we share the park locator to an application?
So the park locator application itself, you have your web map that has layers in it. Think of it like an MXD with feature classes underneath it. You then take that web map and then you share it out as a web application. And then the web application can be that configurable default template where you have the buffer and people can search, or it can be your own style of web application. But you can put that in there as the web application is basically a wrapper around that web map, and then you share it through ArcGIS Online or Portal through ArcGIS. Physically, that application will be living on your own server if you're using Portal for ArcGIS. If you're using ArcGIS Online, it's living in an Esri cloud. But then that's all you need to do. You'll have a URL that you can link to that application, and then anyone who hits that URL that has the credentials will be able to see it. If you share it with everyone, that literally means anyone who hits the URL can see it, but you can control who sees what when you publish it.
Yep, and everything you described up to how you're sharing it is done through that solutions deployment tool. So that takes care of standing all those resources, the maps, the apps, all that kind of stuff up for you, and then it's up to you how you share it, and you have all the flexibilities that you do with anything else, within ArcGIS Online to do that.
Okay, great, thanks. And how about this one? We are exploring App Studio for some projects. Any thoughts on its versatility? Would you be able to cover it in some of the next webinars?
So App Studio is a tricky one because it's not just an ArcGIS focused problem. You have to work hand in hand with your respective App Studio or your respective app stores to get everything launched. So App Studio is a tricky one because every user has a somewhat different story. If you guys are interested about more information, you can email me and Mike, and we can arrange a conversation with the App Studio team who know a lot more about how the actually development cycle works and everything. I used App Studio a little bit, but beyond actually developing an app, I don't know much about how to physically deploy it to an app store or anything like that.
Yeah, with all that said, though, we're seeing an ever-increasing frequency of the use of App Studio across environment and natural resources, agriculture agencies, fish and wildlife, for hunting apps, fishing apps.
Yep.
There's several examples, and so that's the other thing we can provide you are some of those examples that were built, directly on App Studio. It's definitely an ever-increasing trend for a lot of things related to R3 and just generally, just resource information, related to things that are under the purview of environment, natural resources.
Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys. And we have a couple more. In terms of R3, have these tools been utilized to track mentorship? For example, would it be possible to map the densities of mentors in an area and then layer that underneath data for number of new recruits to fisheries hunting, for instance, first-time buyer license sales in an area? Seems this could help track mentorship program success and success by area.
So that direct workflow I have not done, but the way you would go about doing that in terms of representing mentors as a point within a corresponding geography, whether that be a zip code or a county or a service area or something like that. Yep, Insights would work really well for that. Again, that's something that we probably would have to take offline, but I'd be happy to help walk you through the logic of how to construct those. That type of workflow and how the analysis would work. But yes, Insights would work for what you're doing right there.
Yeah. I think the thinking of what was just described, especially in terms of the overlays and all that kind of stuff, that's exactly what Insights is, or one of the things that Insights is designed for. So I think it would be an appropriate tool to do exactly what it was being asked there. So definitely let's take that one offline for sure.
Okay, and a couple more. Is there any facility to collect data in real time and publish the data in map for decision making for policymakers?
There sure is. It's called GeoVent Server. You might be familiar with GeoVent Extension. It's virtually the same product, but in 10.5.0, we rolled GeoVent Extension into its own product called GeoVent Server. And so things like telemetry, I've been using it for flood gauges, lightning strikes, things like that. You can use GeoVent to basically hook up to a data stream, and then as new data comes into the data stream, it then pushes it into ArcGIS Pro or ArcMap or ArcGIS Online, and you get a live updating map. So that works really well for data that you need like up to the second. That being said, for things like weather warnings, radar, things like that will update every couple minutes. You can use the time-enabled feature in ArcGIS Online or in ArcView or ArcGIS Pro to do that. But GeoVent works really well when you're tracking something that will update, very frequently, like once every second or multiple times a second. That was what GeoVent was built to do.
Yep. Yeah, and we have a couple of states leveraging that for, Matt mentioned quickly, radio telemetry data, and they're able to bring that in basically real time through GeoVent and, track animal movements, track their interaction with other species, things like that. There's also, I did want to mention, there's also various real-time data sources available through the Living Atlas as well, so which Matt mentioned during his demonstrations, and that provides some good resources there too that you can pull in and leverage with your other operational data, or even in an operations dashboard like we were showing and things like that.
Okay, great. We probably have time for one more. And this question is, what are some of the main differences between Insights and ArcGIS Online?
So Insights is a new product that is meant to be kind of an exploratory product. ArcGIS Online basically is a way to take what you've already been doing in traditional desktop GIS, but share it out and be kind of more of a collaborative space where people can log in and view content that other people have shared. Insights is meant more to be a product that someone who has a lot of questions about data can come log into and then, work on that data set and do analysis kind of free form by dragging and dropping data sets in. And so they are analogous in that, it's meant to be collaborative. You can have multiple people working in ArcGIS Online and share content. Likewise, you can have multiple users in Insights share content. But ArcGIS Online is meant to be a way to kind of deploy things like web applications, store data for users to kind of come in and work together in groups, where Insights is meant to be more of an analytical tool for someone to come in and do a lot of the analysis that you would normally do in something like an advanced copy of ArcMap or an advanced copy of ArcGIS Pro, but do it in a different context, in a different paradigm than you would in a traditional GIS analysis.
Okay, great. Thanks, Matt. So that's all the time we have for questions. If we didn't get to your question, we will follow up with you directly. And reminder, there will be a short survey that will pop up on your screen after the webinar ends, and we would greatly appreciate your feedback. And thank you for joining us, and we'll send you an email with a link to the recording within the next week or so. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks, everyone.